December 22nd, 1973, and it started, I think, out in the Pacific Ocean somewhere. At totality, it swept across La Chorrera, and it completed itself in the delta of the Amazon over the city of Belém, which is a big river city in the Amazon. Well, I looked at this, and as an amateur scholar of Joyce, I was aware that the delta symbol for Joyce was always the vagina. There's that whole geometry lesson in Finnegan's Wake that has to do with the inverting of the triangles, which is actually this obscene thing that he's going through. So I knew that the delta was the symbol of the vagina, and then I saw that this eclipse ended in the delta of the Amazon. And then I thought, of course, the delta of the Amazon, the world mother. The Amazon is, the largest female geographical feature on the planet. And here we had a total eclipse of the sun on a winter solstice completing itself at Belém. And Belém is the Portuguese word for Bethlehem. You see, I was seriously, it's called delusion of reference, this condition. So, and I thought, wow, far out. Now we have the answer to Yeats' question. Do you know what Yeats' question was? What rough beast is it that slouches toward Bethlehem to be born? And so I was all quite keen on all of this. Now, as if that weren't strange enough, whenever somebody comes up with something like that, the desperate argument of the pseudo-rationalists, when really slammed to the wall, is that this information was known. It was published in books, these eclipse tracts, these ephemerides, and so forth. It was all published in books, and consequently, you didn't predict the future. You merely tapped into the sum total of the human database already existent, and your unconscious has taken all these clues and all this data and woven it together into a delusion which is designed to suck you in and trap you. Well, this is a hard argument to overcome. The only way that you could overcome that argument is that if you predicted an event that was non-repeating and that nobody on Earth knew it was going to happen or could possibly know that it's going to happen at the time you make the prediction. So I was in the early months of 73 and the late months of 72 running around telling everybody that this winter solstice with an eclipse over the delta of the Amazon was going to be of cosmic importance. Well then, about March of 1973, I was reading my morning paper, and on page 4 there was this large headline, and it said, "Brightest comet yet headed toward Earth." And I was reading this thing, and it said, this object will reach perihelion, meaning closest approach to the sun, on December 22nd of this year. This was the comet Kohoutek. Well, now the interesting thing about Kohoutek was it didn't amount to much, but I had predicted its window of appearance before it was detected by human beings or instruments anywhere on the planet. So it was, just from the mushroom to me, like a perfect proof that it was giving information that couldn't come from the human unconscious, couldn't come from any calculation of past events, that a unique long-period comet, never before seen, and probably never to be seen again, was going to fall right smack in the center of my window of predictive intensity. So, it's just an instance of the cosmic giggle. I mean, in terms of what does it mean? It's like, when that question was posed to Mr. Natural, he said, it don't mean shit. But isn't it strange? Well, that's enough of that. That's just to, yeah.
How would you relate, do you see any relationship between the principles governing the I Ching and are they fit any way with morphic fields or Jungian archetypes in terms of how they affect events in time?
Well, morphogenetic fields, the theory that lies behind the I Ching, all of these things are attempts to make a statement about the frontier of understanding. And to the degree that, in other words, it's like there's a perception which wants to be born, but it is, since it's at the edge of cognitive revelation, it's very hard to get it right. I mean, the I Ching, morphogenetic fields, the Tarot, the time wave that we looked at yesterday, these are all attempts to encompass within a metaphor something which is at present almost unsayable. It's very interesting, if you care about this kind of thing, to go back into the history of the evolution of ideas and see what it is like, what the ideological climate is like right before an idea crystallizes and is finally gotten straight, or pretty straight. An area where that happened that I spent some time poking around in is the 15 years preceding Darwin's publication of The Origin of Species and Alfred Russel Wallace's paper to the Royal Society in London. All of biology in England and Germany and on the continent, all of biology was intensely involved with what the literature of the time called the problem of the species. And, all these people were exploring various parts of the world, especially the tropics. They could see that if you go from one Indonesian island to another, there is shift of species. There are slightly modified forms. In other words, they had all the ingredients in front of them on the table, and people were trying to figure it out, but they didn't quite have it. And then it crystallized in the minds of certain people. For Alfred Russel Wallace, who is the real discoverer of natural selection, it sort of relates to our theory of creativity. He had malaria on the island of Ternate, north of the Moluccas, or in the North Moluccas. And in the 5th day of this intense malarial fever, he saw the solution to the problem of the species. And he wrote it down in this fevered state, and then he worked his way through this illness. And when he came down and looked at what he'd written, he couldn't find fault with it. It seemed right. It's just a page and a half. It's preserved. It's all there. So he didn't know what exactly to do. So he decided he would write a letter to the greatest natural scientist of the age, who was the aristocratic and well-connected Charles Darwin back in England. By this time, Wallace had been 6 years knocking around in the forests of Indonesia. So he sends this letter to Darwin. Darwin had been working on The Origin of Species for nearly 18 years. This letter arrives in the post. He opens it up and he just says, "Oh,